Okay, so hopefully at this point your wash has dried efficiently, and I got to tell you, it just took that harvest brown that we used and gave it just a great weathered, leathery look. That I mean, it really took it to the next level. And this back rib cage, what I was really kind of worried about, ended up not being too affected by the pure black wash that we ended up using. So I'm really happy with that. I'm glad we went in though and kind of dabbed out some of that excess though, because I feel like we would have really pulled up quite a bit back there. But we got some great shadows going. And it just has a really great weathered look to it that I really like. So next step now is to dry brush back on our base color, which was Harvest Brown. So give it a good shake. Hopefully not as much of a shake as we needed to the first time around, because we just shook it probably 20 minutes ago, depending on how long it took your wash to dry. Give it nice little, just a little baby drop there. And we're going to use our flat brush again, because that is what we dry brush with. We want that flat surface to give that good highlight to it and get us back to our base color again. So I'm going to make sure that my brush is good and clean, that I don't have any paint on there. Now just get a little dab. We're going to clean it off. Boom, boom. Dab the tip. Okay. And now we're just going to hit the main body of the quiver. Because once again, we're getting back up to a baseline here. We're not highlighting. We're just taking those areas that we want it to be kind of neutral, for lack of a better term. But we're not going to be covering up that great weathered look we got from the wash that we did. And we also don't want to sleep on the bottom of your quiver. Make sure you hit that. And then also you want to hit the strap. Now I know we're using our flat brush, but once again, because we're dry brushing here, we shouldn't run the risk. We should be only getting paint where we want to get the paint. Because we're not dealing with wet paint that can run a little bit and get places we don't want it to be. We're dealing purely with just essentially faint layer of pigments. So it should prevent you from messing anything up too bad. Okay, so we've hit everywhere. And I can definitely tell some of the darkness up here got lightened back up to that base Harvest Brown, but we still have that rich, leathery look that that wash gave us. So I'm really happy with that. So we're going to clean off our brush, get it nice and wet again to get all of that paint off there, because now it's time to highlight our quiver and strap with dry brushing. Hopefully at some point down the road, we're going to try some techniques on actually highlighting and shading without dry brushing, to where we're actually going in and really being intentional about where our shading and highlights are. Not doing that today. That's advanced technique, and we're not going to attempt to mess with that. Leather brown is what we're going with now for our highlight. So first time we're using it, so be like that machine at Sherwin-Williams and just go to town. It's just a great sound that you're getting also from shaking this paint up. Keep it away from the microphone. That auditory experience is not something that I think anybody wants. So let's pray. Okay, got a little bubble in there, but that'll burst without too much issue. Pop. Okay, so same deal. We're going to get some on the tip of our brush. Not go too nuts. Then get most of that paint off there. So we just have a faint dusting. And this, we're just hitting the highlights. So wanting to get the back of the quiver. I also want to hit top of the strap to really accentuate the shadow we're getting on the edge of the strap from kind of those natural shadows that would be coming up from sunlight hitting top of the strap and casting a shadow. And I know hitting the strap, especially the backside underneath the arm, it seems unnecessary. Some may even say tedious, like what I'm doing right now. But if you do it, your mini is going to hold up to scrutiny really well. People are going to be able to pick it up, flip it around, look at it, and be really impressed by the level of work you put into making this mini as good as it could possibly be. I think I may have hit it a bit too heavy with the highlight on the backside. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to really hit my paper towel, get a lot of that paint off there. Just go back in. See if I can deaden that down a little. Okay. And I mean, sorry if I was holding it down here for too long. I'm really trying to keep an eye on what I'm doing on my end while still showing you all. But we have a great highlight there on the back of the quiver that's not shiny, but it has kind of that natural light source hitting the leather up here at the top of the strap. I'm really happy with how that turned out. May have hit a little bit of my highlight on this section here, which, you know, is kind of a bummer. But let me really take a look. You can kind of see that. But we can always go back in with our base color or even our dragon bone highlight and dry brush over that. In fact, no time like the present to give that a shot. Because why not? Because with dry brushing, it dries incredibly quick. Also have to get some paint on my finger. Okay, let's just go in and try to hit. Boom, look at that. Covered up that highlight mistake that I made. Give me that good dragon bone highlight with the dry brushing. And that's, I mean, mistakes are just mistakes. Nothing to get worked up over. It would have been really easy for me to get frustrated and put my base coat back on that section and then wash it and then go through the whole process again. But I had an instinct of, you know what? I bet if I just dry brush over that, that's going to give me enough coverage to look good. And it does. So yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with how that turned out. So never be afraid to try that, because if it didn't work, then I could go back to desert sand, mountain stone wash, desert sand dry brush, dragon bone dry brush, and do the whole process. And then you can easily fix your mistake. But I was able to avoid a lot of time by just taking a chance, seeing what was going to work. So yeah, that looks really good. And we are done with the quiver and strap. I mean, that's as easy as that section is. So now we get to move on to the bow. Let me clean my brush off. It can be a little dicey because I am dealing with white paint. So I want to make sure that, and this is just technique I'm doing right here. You can see there's some white spots on the rim of my glass. I'm just getting some water in it, taking it up to the rim, and I'm waiting until I don't really have a milky consistency. It's just that clear water. So excellent. I'm going to, because this black, pure black is taking up a lot of real estate on my palette, I'm going to try to tame it in a bit with a napkin. Just come in. And you also notice, I'll point out the fact that I am painting on my bare desktop, which some may say is a bold move. But all these paints are water soluble. If they get in your clothes and they dry, they can stain. But if I spill paint on this, I can just use water and clean it right up. And I used hot water to clean the palette this morning, and when you all saw it, it looked like a brand new Greek yogurt lid. So now we're going to move on to let's do the bow. We'll hit all of this with our base color, wash, and then highlight. Well, base color, dry brush, and then highlight. So actually, the bow, we're going to start out with the base color of leather brown. So we've already got that out and it's shaken. So that's happy. And then our wash is going to be harvest brown because it's a shade darker, which is nice. And our dry brush highlight color, we're actually going to be doing some mixing. We're going to do 2 drops of leather brown, which is our base color, and 1 drop of desert sand. So we've already got our paints out and ready to go, which is happy. So base color, obviously, leather brown. So we're going to get another drop because I have not made a wet palette yet. And so my paints are drying on me fairly quickly. We will learn how to make a wet palette soon, and that will be wonderful. Now, for painting the bow, the tips, where you see these, they kind of bulge out and they have we're going to be painting those polished silver, same as this strap on the back of the quiver. So we're going to paint up to them. Even if we get a bit of overlap, that's totally fine. The big place that you want to avoid overlapping is the hand. So probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to get down to like 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch away from the hand with my flat brush, and I'll come in with the detail brush and finish up there. So get a good amount of paint, but not a lot. You don't want, see, if you can see, the paint's kind of bulbing out there. I don't want that. So I'm just going to dab on my palette just to get it down to the bristles, so to speak, and start painting. You want to make sure that you're really spreading the paint around. With something round like this, it's going to be really easy for that paint to kind of stick almost on one side. So just use your brush to make sure that you're getting coverage everywhere and it's not building up, because this mini has some really good detailing. If you really look at the bow, it has kind of a wood texture to it, and you don't want to cover that up. You want to let that still shine through. So I'm making sure to use my brush to move the paint around rather than applying new paint constantly. And be sure to get in here on the back of the wood. Don't want to miss that. That's going to be the spot that I have to remind myself throughout this whole process to make sure that I hit. I'm going to get right up to where we're going to put the silver with my flat brush, because once again, we're going to be covering up any mistakes when we go in to paint that. Be very aware, though, that you're kind of getting close to the top of this skeleton skull. And so you don't want to accidentally, like I almost did there, paint, give him a nice brown spot on the top of his skull. This is just a tip that I'm kind of doing for my own benefit. When I go back to collect paint, where I dab my brush before we got started actually painting because I had too much, I'm using those dabs to collect paint because that's going to dry a lot quicker than the drop of paint I put on the palette. And we're trying not to be wasteful here. use all the paint that the kit gave us. So once again, you can dab. Down here, the bow touches the skeleton's leg, which we have already painted. So I may paint the front of the bow with my flat brush. And for the back side where it actually makes contact with the leg, probably go ahead and use my detail brush there. And you'll see with my shaky hands, I have some desert sand on here already, but it's completely dry. So we're just painting over it. And nobody but you and me will ever know it was there. Okay. So I'm getting pretty happy with that. I am going to take some of the paint off of my brush and just, I feel like there are some sections where there's a bit too much paint. And that is not only going to cover up the details, but it's going to make my dry time a lot longer. And I don't want either of those things to happen. So getting the water off of this brush, patting it dry, which is important just for the care of your brush. I'm going to be coming back to that brush pretty quickly, so I'm not going to worry about putting the plastic cover back on there. And now we're going to get just some on the tip of our detail brush and come in, get right up to that hand, because skeleton's thumb doesn't cover up as much of the bow as the rest of his hand, so we want to make sure that we acknowledge that in how we're painting the mini. We're just getting right up to the edge. Once again, when it comes time to wash and highlight, we're not going to have to be as concerned. But if you'll remember from a couple minutes ago with the collarbone debacle, your dry brushing can affect other parts of your mini. So you do want to at least be aware. You don't need to be as concerned as I am right now with the base coat, because the base coat's just going to straight up paint over what you've done. And it's a lot harder to come in with a dry brush and fix it. Sorry, I'm just having to give a lot of my focus over to the process right now. You may notice that my forehead is a little red. Been doing lawn work all day because all you D&D players out there who own their own homes know that home ownership is a campaign unto itself. Never quite finished. But if you're lucky, you have a pretty great party member with you like I do, who keeps you out of trouble. So, I'm really happy with how I did that. You notice I got a little bit higher here just to acknowledge that this pinky and the thumb were not right next to each other. So that looks good in my humble opinion. Back of the bow, really happy with that. Inside of the bow, I think I hit everything I needed to. Where it touched the leg, I didn't hit the bone anywhere. So yeah, I'm really happy with how that turned out, and we maintained all of that great texture of the bow. It looks like brown plastic painted, like brown painted plastic, but hopefully with the wash, that wash will get in all of those cracks and crevices that we've got there and give us a really good, rich, textured look to this wood, because right now it's just all very monochromatic. It doesn't look terrible. And if you were just, this is going to be a baddie on your table and you had to paint 5 others, nobody would begrudge you saying, that looks, my players will recognize this is a bow. Time to move on. But we're learning here. So next up, we're going to take Harvest Brown. I believe it is a 1-to-4 ratio, like all of our other washes have been. Let me double check. Aha. Oh, we forgot to base color our arrow shaft, so we're not quite done. So it's just going to be a quick little swipe underneath where the feathers are, because we're going to hit the feathers with blue. So you can see it's just a quick little right in there. Glad I thought about that. Okay, so try to get right back in here. Once again, though, don't overdo it with the paint like I just did right there, because I put a glob of paint in there and it totally is covering up the fact that these are individual arrow shafts, and we don't want to cover that up. You don't want to cover up any of the details that they give you to work with here. Okay. So I feel like I got everything I need to get. I'm going to get a little bit more. Just dab some of that paint off of there. Okay. Happy with that. It's just a quick little brush stroke in between your quiver and the feathers on the arrow. But once again, if you are having a hard time just staying right in those lines, favor towards the arrows. We're going to be painting the arrows here in a bit. We're not going to be repainting the quiver unless we get paint on it, in which case you got to repaint part of it. It's not a big deal. But if you err towards the arrows, we're going to cover that up in a bit anyway. So it's not as big of a headache for yourself if you hit the arrows instead of the quiver. Okay, so it is going to be 3 drops of water to 1 drop of Harvest Brown. So a little bit thicker wash that we're going for. Not entirely sure why, if I'm being perfectly honest with everybody, but it's what we're doing. Okay, here's your drop of Harvest Brown. And just like we did before, we're going to use our paintbrush. I'll drop the camera down a bit just so you can get a better view of this process. So getting the back of our brush into the water, drop, drop, drop. Okay. Then we're going to mix it up. Make sure you get it mixed up nice and good, just to where you got an even wash all the way through. I don't want to pull wash from over here and it be thicker than the wash from over here just because of where the drops of water. Okay, so it specifically told me 3 drops. So I'm going to trust it. Get some of my wash on there and just start going over everything. And this will darken that wood up quite a bit. But it's not going to give us really those shadows that we were getting with the pure black or the mountain stone, because it's just it's one shade darker of brown. So I think it's just going to give us a nice, richer wood look. which will of course be lovely and wonderful. Just be sure with the wash that is completely just not at all like the colors around it, you want to have that deft hand. Because if we got brown wash on our bones, it's definitely going to stand out. And you don't want that. Be sure to get the back of the bow. That's mostly me telling myself that. I'm sure that you knew that right away. Okay, and you can't forget the arrow shafts. Like I said before, favor the arrows, which I'm doing a lot more now because I'm using my flat brush as opposed to my detail brush. So I'm trying to spread this out. Give plenty of love. So the fact that we got a fair amount of our harvest brown on our arrows or our feathers, not a huge deal. It's okay. Okay, so now it's just a matter of letting this dry and seeing how it looks. So we will return in just a bit to see what we're working with now. All right, guys, so we're making a lot of really great progress on our mini. We have the bow painted and washed as well as the arrow shafts. So come back next time and we will work on dry brushing. And we are getting really close to being done with this mini, and I'm really excited. So I will see you next time.